The world of Naruto is filled with so much lore that during the 14-year run of the manga between 1999 and 2014, we got introduced to a ton of iconic characters and backstories, and some of them I'd argue are some of the most iconic and well-written in all of shonen history. Yet with 700 chapters of material, 710 if you count the 2015 bonus volume, Naruto Gaiden, the 7th Hokage, and the Scarlet Spring, there were just as many characters who didn't get their stories told to us in the manga, or they were greatly reduced to only being shown in the data books as lump text to give us extra information. Join me in today's newest Naruto Explained video where we take a look at just a few of the legendary Naruto characters whose stories they were never shown in the Naruto manga or anime, or if they were shown, they had extreme chunks of their story cut out. Starting things off, we're going to be going with one of the biggest WTF mentions when it comes to characters who have never gotten proper justice in the series, which is going to be the White Fang, better known as Kakashi's father. Between the Naruto manga and the story Kakashi writes in the 6th Hokage and the Fallen Sun, there's actually quite a bit about his character that will make you wish we saw it animated. For starters, we know that Kakashi's father killed himself when Kakashi was a kid, and it ultimately drove Kakashi to be this hard stickler for the rules that Minato at times had trouble breaking through to him, and at one point Kakashi was willing to sacrifice Rin if it meant completing the Kanabi Bridge destruction mission, but Obito ended up talking sense into him. However, did you know that Sakumo Hatake's last days were even darker than you might think? So in the Kakashi Wrestling story, there's a scene where Kakashi reflects on his father's last days and his funeral. Kakashi recalls how when his father returns home from the mission his team failed, his father's joyful mood, it had changed. The culture back then in Konoha during the younger 3rd Hokage's years was much different than the kind-hearted, softer grandpa 3rd Hokage that all you Naruto fans are familiar with. So the younger Hiruzen, he's the one who started the 2nd and the 3rd Great Ninja Wars and was every bit of what you would have expected from the student of Tobirama Senju. The mission, it came first no matter what, no exceptions. That culture led to Sakumo's teammates. They turned on him, blaming him for their mission failing. He even saved his friends, his comrades, yet they all felt shame for the mission failing, and it caused him to drink in his home before eventually killing himself. Kakashi reveals in that story that during the funeral of his father, while he stood in the back, he watched his father's teammates openly say that he got what he deserved, that killing himself was the least that he could do for the shame brought upon by his willing failure of their mission during a crucial part of the war. He saw others openly talking down about his father, practically spitting at the ground, and it led to him being so overcome with grief that when he bumped into Minato, who tried to tell Kakashi how much he admired his father and he agreed with his choice, Kakashi passed out from both the trauma and the fatigue because he hadn't slept a day since he found his father's body, which led to Minato taking Kakashi home. The manga tells us not only did he kill Sasori's parents, which made Chiyo hate him forever, but we also get told by Minato that Kakashi's father had more power that was greater than the legendary Sannin trio. At that point in time, when Minato stated this, the legendary Sannin trio, they weren't the ones like, oh my god, they're in their 20s, they fought Hanzo. They were 51 in Naruto Part 1, which means the Sannin who he's referring to, they were the ones that were pushing 40, which means they were still in their prime when Minato was comparing Kakashi's father to them. The idea of being able to see someone on that upper end of the high Kage tier in Naruto actually do battle is something that would have been really amazing to see. For reference, that high Kage tier power where the legendary Sannin are is like people like Itachi, transformed Kisame, 5 Kage Summit Sasuke, 4th Raikage A, Sasori in his human form where you can use those 100 puppets, and above that tier are people like the Deva Path who has all of the 6 paths chakra from all the pains poured into one body, Tobirama Senju, and EMS Sasuke. Even if you put him between those two tiers on a highball, or you say he's only relative to the legendary Sannin, that's a crazy respectable amount of power. Like, the White Fang was so much of a boogeyman that even a couple years after his death, in Naruto chapter 242, we flat out see Stone Ninja getting spooked at the sight of Kakashi because He has silver hair and he's carrying his father's blade. The power was so overwhelming that the guy was so scared he didn't even think to question if someone that small could be the White Fang, which shows how much Sakumo Hatake scared people. Just as we saw people tremble at the sight of a slender, spiky, blonde-haired man who was known as the Yellow Flash. Next, we have a character who was literally in the anime and manga so short of a time period that if you blink, you likely missed him, which is going to be Setsuna Uchiha. Back in Naruto Volume 43, when Obito was pretending to be Madara Uchiha and he told Sasuke the truth about the Uchiha clan, he mentioned how in the years after Madara left the village, there were those within the Uchiha clan who had begun to see things his way and realized that he had been right about Konoha and their future as Konoha shinobi if the Uchiha stayed. One of those shinobi was Setsuna Uchiha, and he basically was Fugaku before Fugaku became Fugaku, which it should be worth noting that during this time period, Fugaku would have been a child because he was only 6 years younger than the legendary Sannin trio. Setsuna saw the direction the Uchiha were going under Tobirama, even with Tobirama being of the belief that making the Uchiha the ones over the police force would show how much trust he had in the clan. Despite those efforts, it led to Setsuna trying to muster up a group of Uchiha to directly go against Tobirama, but as we all know, he would never get the opportunity because the Gold and Silver brothers, two pseudo Jinchuriki Kurama, would lead a team of 20 S-ranked ninjas to kill Tobirama. While we are never told what happened to Setsuna, given that no other Uchiha tried to overthrow Konoha until decades later and Fugaku did it strongly implies that he was one of many Uchiha who died during the first Ninja War, like Tobirama and so many others did. The idea is seeing the build up to the idea of another Uchiha following in Madara's footsteps, trying to save the clan from what they believe to be a fate where they're wiped out, all while we as readers know that a few decades later, Itachi would massacre the clan on behalf of Konoha. It is something that would have been really amazing to see. Now we move on to the immortal Akatsuki duo of Hidan and Kakuzu. While it might seem odd that two villains who got their own arc in the manga should have been explored more, the truth is that even when you account for anime filler, we didn't see the whole truth of their characters. There was a lot cut out. But thanks to the third Naruto databook, which covers Naruto volumes 28 through 43, as well as some of the information in the Sasuke Shinden, the Book of Sunrise, we learn the origin stories of Hidan and Kakuzu and that they're pretty messed up, and they showcase what happens when the ninja world fails someone. In the case of Kakuzu, the guy was a hidden waterfall village shinobi, considered an elite of his village. During the first Great Ninja War, he was dispatched by his village on an assassination mission, but unfortunately for him, that mission was to kill the strongest shinobi alive at that point, Hashirama Senju. Kakuzu somehow miraculously survived that battle at Hashirama without dying, and when he returned back to his village, with the elders completely furious at him, they locked him away in a cell and they were going to execute him for his failure, which led to Kakuzu breaking out of his cell and turning against his village and becoming a rogue ninja. He stole the jutsu scroll of his village that contained the forbidden jutsu called the Earth Grunge Fear, which basically transformed Kakuzu's body into a ragdoll and allowed him to take the hearts of others, basically making him near immortal. The first hearts that Kakuzu took were the hearts of the elders who sentenced him to death for failing to kill Hashirama. This, of course, was never animated. The only time that we saw Kakuzu mention his past was when he told Kakashi he had previously fought the first Hokage, which is an absolute shame. Hidan is another one with a very messed up backstory, which was never animated. In the filler added to the Itachi Shinden Daylight and Midnight adaptations, we see the tail end of Hidan's rogue ninja story, where he's gotten on the radar of the Akatsuki due to all the people he's killed and is recruited into the group, but that's the tail end of his story. How we got to this point is even crazier than you realize, and it should make you look at Hidan differently. Hidan was a shinobi of the hidden village in the hot water, but because he was 22 in Naruto Shippuden, it means that unfortunately by the time he became a shinobi, the third ninja war, it had ended. It was during the time after the war that Hidan found himself growing resentment at the direction of his village, but he was still nevertheless fascinated by the stories of war that he heard, and at one point the Sasuke Shinden Story of Sunrise novel reveals that he was even tracking down the massacre site of the Chinoiki clan where the Uchiha had massacred them in what was called the Valley of Hell just outside of his village. When Hidan investigated the site closer, however, however, he noticed that there were bodies that weren't skeletons, but instead they were corpses, and that they had their blood sucked dry, which led to the higher-ups of his village basically saying that they thought that Hidan massacred the people there because of his growing fascination with war and death in Jashin. His village, it was transitioning from being a shinobi village to being a tourist village. They weren't able to compete with the larger villages like Konoha and Tsunagakure and the Cloud Village, etc., but they still needed to be able to pay the bills. So the feudal lord basically pulled rank, and he transitioned them away from being a military village to being a tourist village, basically cutting down on the number of shinobi and shifting focus to selling itself as a hot spring destination. This led to shinobi like Hidan getting forced to do guard missions and escort missions of wealthy clients who were coming to visit the hot springs. Growing annoyed with the change in his village, Hidan finally snapped one night and he killed all of his neighbors and whatever tourists he ran across before leaving the village as a rogue ninja, which is how he became a member of the Jashin cult, being drawn in by their doctrine that you don't just love thy neighbor, but you also have a duty to slaughter them as well. This led to Hidan successfully being the first person in that Jashin cult to survive the immortality jutsu. That's where the anime picks up, where you see Conan and Itachi go after Hidan, because during that time the Akatsuki, they were still a group taking on mercenary work. They weren't doing their Biju hunt yet, and Hidan was taking out his grudge against the land of hot water for turning his village into a tourist destination. Obviously this might have been a bit too graphic and violent to be shown in the anime, though I would debate otherwise given that Naruto Shippuden aired in a primetime TV slot during weekday where there are less restrictions on what can be aired. There's no reason that we couldn't have gotten this animated just because we saw sections of the Uchiha massacre in episode 455 that were pretty damn graphic, but sadly Studio Pierrot decided not to animate this backstory. Finally, we have Shisui Uchiha, who we have seen some in the anime, but more than he was ever shown in the manga. However, there's more to Shisui's story than we ever got introduced to. For instance, the Itachi Shinden Book of Midnight's anime adaptation cut a massive chunk out of his story. Back when he first became a genin at an early age, due to the fact that Konoha needed shinobi during the Third Ninja War, and in the aftermath afterwards, it was in the aftermath of one of the battles where Shisui's team was sent to do cleanup. Basically, they're retrieving dead bodies. A 6-year-old Shisui awakened his Mangekyo Sharingan. The way that this happened was that there was a teammate who was older than Shisui who died when Shisui had a chance to save him, and he didn't. He was jealous of his teammate because for all of his natural skill, he was already stronger and better at jutsu than Shisui, despite Shisui having a Sharingan eye. As they were escaping from their pursuers, he had a chance to save his teammate's life, but he hesitated for a moment because he gave into his jealousy, and when he did finally attempt to save him, it took too long, and his friend ended up dying, which caused his Mangekyo Sharingan to awaken from the guilt and the trauma. But Shisui in his depression kept the Mangekyo Sharingan awakening in a secret in the months afterwards. It would be in the time after this that he would meet a young Itachi for the first time, and it would be during that training with Itachi that Shisui would get over his depression, and he would make it a point to train Itachi up so that he could be the rival to replace the one that Shisui let die, which makes their friendship that much more touching when you have this intel. Well, obviously, I didn't touch on shinobi like Toka Senju, the female aide to Hashirama, who was considered a genjutsu prodigy, which is insane when you consider that Toka is a kunoichi during the Warring States era. I'm going to cut this one shorter because in all honesty, I could easily go through 20 shinobis whose stories were never shown, which speaks volumes to the layers of the depth that Naruto's lore has, which if we hit 3,000 likes, I'll make that video for you guys if there's enough interest. In the meantime, click here to watch more videos from Naruto Explained, or click here to watch videos from my Anime Explained channel or my One Piece Explained channel, where I talk about other series that aren't Naruto.